And Trevor Lohman is back with us. Thanks for joining us. How you doing?
Good, man. How are you guys doing?
Good. Good.
Good to
Looking
be
forward.
back.
Yeah, good. I can't believe how fast it happened. We're like, oh yeah, come back when you're ready to talk about the Shroud. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey man, the book's out and I'm ready to talk about the Shroud. So
I just get in an obsessed state and just write. And then I don't want to think about it ever again. But then I remind myself I have to go talk about it. Otherwise, no one
And the
knows it
Shroud
exists.
is the Shroud of Turin, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this just came up, didn't it?
It's
With someone
popular
else?
right now. People are talking about it's kind of waning again, but
You
recently,
know
like
who was
what?
really into it was Richard Serra. That
yeah,
guy
that's what I remember.
was the most into the Shroud I've ever seen anyone. Like he stumbled into it and he just couldn't get off of it for like 6 months.
Yeah, it's I was surprised just the whole like culture that exists around it. Like people really they come to identify with their position on the shroud. People are like, I'm a shroud skeptic. I'm a shroud authenticity proponent. It's very weird how
That's what happened to us when we were looking into DB Cooper because we were
okay.
interviewing supposedly DB Cooper's son. And when we started researching and I was following the podcast, and it's the same thing. There was a whole culture around it. People like a whole bunch of DB Cooper skeptics. Everybody had written 35 books. Everybody thinking they have their own answer on who DB Cooper was. The FBI is involved. All
Yep.
kinds of podcasts dedicated to it. It was just it's interesting how nowadays these subcultures sort of happen around one topic.
Yeah, this is like a broad philosophical comment, not really relevant to this exactly, but people do they like fall in love with their ideas. My day job is in science, professionally. And yeah, people fall in love with their ideas. They're like, this has to be it. They interpret every new piece of evidence in that lens. It's weird. It's a weird part about being human, I guess. But yeah, I felt like everyone was trying to sell me an angle on it. It's not a topic I know anything about. I don't know anything about relics and archaeology, but I can read, I like reading. So I just combed through everything I could find, realized that it's almost like an insurmountable task to read everything on the shroud. I had no idea. Like there's thousands of papers. But I read all the major ones and I was surprised. I mean, what do you guys know about it before we get into it?
Okay, so what I know is that there's supposed to have the image of Christ on it, and originally they thought it was just from the decomposition or the blood or whatever, but then when they did some sort of photo analysis on it, they found that it was burnt in by light that came from the inside out.
You know more than most already. Yeah, that's all pretty much spot on. Yeah. The only distinction there is it's not burnt. I mean, so yeah, you're right. Everyone assumed it was like either just a piece of artwork or if it is real, it was like a transfer of fluid from a body, like a decomposing body. And it wasn't until they took a photo of it in 1898 and looked at it in negative where they go, oh, this is not pressing of, fluid. There's something different going on here. Have you guys looked at it in negative? It's a easy. You can just
No.
look like Shroud of Turin face negative, and like you can even just put a photo in Photoshop, which I did because I was like, "Is this really what it looks like?" So you can even put a normal photograph in Photoshop and just invert the colors. And here's what's unique about looking at it in negative is that it's a photo positive. This is the opposite of what you might expect. Like if I took a picture of you, the negative is going to look strange.
Yeah.
Your hair is going to be white, for example.
Is this it?
Yeah, that's it. This is actually, I think, the very first photo. This looks like the Secondo Pia photo. It's tough to say, but there's different versions of it. There's like a sepia tone version where it looks even more photorealistic. Oh, these are all like the hypotheses. Nice. And when you take a picture of something, the negative looks less like a person. In this case, looks more like a person. The resolution seems higher. It looks more realistic. And so this was odd. This is like if you do an n-gram search of the Shroud of Turin, you know, where you can see like how many times it's mentioned, you see this blip in 1898, which, you know, this is where people got interested in it again, is when they saw this photo. Click on that one on the top right. That's one of my favorites.
This one?
Yeah, that's an actual inverse. So it's not black and white. It's just a literal inverse. And it's odd, right? You got to admit it's kind of unusual. And so the question becomes like, well, what is this thing? And so do you guys have any like thought? Graham, have you heard any more about it than what Darren said?
Well, I just remember way back at the beginning of our podcast, and probably before that, it was getting popular in, I would say, the 2010s kind of thing. And that's when I think Richard Serrett and some of those conspiracy shows kept talking about it. But even after hearing a little bit about it there, I didn't realize that there was this supernatural aspect to it, like that it was about energy. I always thought it was just a leftover cloth that had, and I never really understood why there was an imprint, or that's why I never really thought it was anything, because I was like, well, how could that be? But then when you explained it on the show last time you were here talking about God's eye view,
I didn't even realize we got into it. That's right.
Well, you just touched on it a little bit, because I think we're going to save it for a whole show. But
way to dox him, Graham.
You did mention that though.
No.
You did mention that though. That you know, it was, and then I was like, oh, that's why it's like so interesting.
Yeah, it's unusual for sure. I mean, so I try to be skeptical, you know, because I've been watching these people talk about it, and you can just tell the people who just know it's real. And by real, I mean like it's an image captured of Jesus at the resurrection, right? That's what I mean by real. And then there's people that know it's fake, that it's a medieval forgery, which is kind of the consensus, you know. Up until
how would they have
recently.
done that if they were going to try and fake it back then? Is there any method they could have used?
Well,
let's before we even get into that, how would we fake it today?
Yeah.
If you were
So
gonna fake this, how would you do it?
Well, we haven't, you know, there's been no compelling recreation despite plenty of funding, not plenty of funding, but funding to try to do so. There's one guy, Garla Shelley, who did at first glance, pretty convincing like recreation. So what he did is he took a person and placed a cloth over them and rubbed like an acidic, very mildly acidic, like wash over the top of the cloth, right? And so if you kind of maintain constant pressure, like you can sort of apply more of the acidic wash to the more prominent areas of the body. And then it didn't work on the face because the head kind of protrudes too much. So he made like a sculpture of the front of a face and sort of did the same thing very carefully, trying to, you know, he's looking at the Shroud of Turin, trying to recreate it, right? So he's very carefully trying to match it. And then he like put it through a dryer to sort of age the linen, and then he dyed the linen. And it's, I mean, you should pull up a picture of Garla Shelley's Shroud of Turin face, and it's similar, you know. We can dive into why it's very clearly not super compelling, but at first glance, like if you don't know a ton about it, it looks pretty interesting. And so while you pull that up, I mean, one of the, you know, the negative, the photonegative aspect was like the first big surprise.
How do you spell it?
Garla Shelley, GarlaSchelli.
Yeah. Okay. Let me see here. I'll share this. You can tell which one to click on.
You can maybe even, if we can find like a side by side, even that'd be cool. Yeah, there's the second one right there.
This one?
Yeah, let's click on that.
Oh crap.
So so the real one's on the left, the kind of imitations on the right.
That's now, I mean, you did a pretty
good it's pretty good, yeah. And so these are both in negative. And so, I mean, yes, the real one is more detailed, I would say. Kind of more realistic, but it's not like astronomically different.
Like hard to rule out, because back then they would have had a lot more time on their hands than Garla Shelley did. You know, it's just like, this is your whole existence. It's just dealing with this dead body. This is, you know, there's no point in rushing it. There's just.
Yeah, but there's, I mean, I agree. I think that's probably the weakest part of the authentic argument is this point that it couldn't be done. These guys were obviously very knowledgeable about anatomy. They were artists. We were almost to Da Vinci's time, not
I
quite. We're
was
like
just
150 years earlier.
I was just
J-
thinking about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a popular like fringe theory is that Da Vinci did it. Um, I don't want to jump around too much. Remind me to come back to Da Vinci, but
Yeah, yeah.
just let's focus on this Garlic Shelley thing. Like, you, there are things that the real shroud does that this imitation does not do, even according to Garlic Shelley, right? And so one of those things is there was this tool invented in the 70s called the VP8 image analyzer. And actually, this guy was really interested in the shroud at Los Alamos Labs. And they got a bunch of NASA scientists involved, a bunch of people involved. And they're like, hey, let's figure out how this thing was made. They didn't have a position. They weren't trying to prove it's real or fake. Like, they kind of almost assumed it was fake, like man made. Let's figure out how it was made. And so they started studying it and they said, it seems like the darkness of the pixels vary with distance to where the body would have been. And so parts of the body that are really prominent, like the nose, seem to have a more higher pixel intensity of the color. And it kind of looks like a monochromatic image. And some of these guys are into medical imaging. And, I know this from working with medical imaging. I mean, what you do is you represent some characteristic on a monochromatic color scale. So in the brain, if you're imaging the brain, you might represent proton spin decay on a scale from black to white. And when you do that, the gray matter might have a slightly different proton spin decay than the white matter. And you can kind of image things, just mapping them to a monochromatic scale. And their idea was this kind of looks like that because it's one color, but it's just different values of that color. It's monochromatic. And so they had this thing they were working on where you could look at an X-ray with this computer software and make it three-dimensional. And so what they did is, a really bright pixel, they would position that closer to the viewer, let's say. So they would assign what's called a vertical relief. So they say, okay, if a pixel is pure white, raise it 6 inches from the cloth or from the image. If it's black, leave it flat. And then so you could sort of form a topographical map of like a humerus, on an X-ray. It turned out not to work super well for a variety of reasons. But in the case of the shroud, if you look at it with this thing, and you could Google it, VP8 shroud, it does a pretty good job of rendering like a three-dimensional image of a face. And if you do it on Garlic Shelley's, it sort of also does, but it's just not nearly as compelling. And even Garlic Shelley says it's like, yeah, we couldn't really capture the 3D data.
But it's weird that Garlub did it on an actual face, right? Didn't he?
No, I think he used I think he made a mask of a real person's face. I don't remember exactly what he did.
But it was based on, but it doesn't look as real. Like it just doesn't look as
right.
It almost looks like fine art.
Click the top left one.
The other one looks like just fine art. Like it looks really real. Like it looks like his face is there.
Yeah, and so this isn't like mind-boggling, but the point is there's some kind of 3D data encoded in the cloth, right? It's not like a photograph. Photograph captures how reflective different parts of an object are, right? And color, This is not that. This is more like the body itself is an image source. And so that's where this idea originally came from, that like energy was released from the body to leave some kind of impression on the cloth. And
have they ever tried this with another body? Is there a chance it just happens every time?
Well, what do you mean by that?
What, another resurrected body? Like,
well, no. What if
the divine resurrection?
What if we just unwrap a mummy and try like?
So the deal the image left by other bodies in cloth is not anything reminiscent of a human being, right? Decomposition leaves like, it's a stain, right? And depending on when you unwrapped the body, you might get a different image. If you got it right when the body started to decay, you might see like fluid around the mouth, because decomposition is not
It happens at
pretty
different
process.
levels depending
Yeah.
on the like lips are going to decompose before your
Yes. So
cheekbone, something like that. Or, yeah.
so there really is no other thing like this.
So, Darren, can you go back to the original one you were looking at before? I just want to ask Trevor before we get into that other stuff some questions about the cool one. Like, yeah, one before this without not Garla's, but the other one.
That one's gone. Well, the
thought
real one is the
That
one.
one's gone.
It's lost to history.
This is the real one right here.
Well, yeah, I know it's just not the same quality of it. So I guess what I curious about is the line on the left, the right, his right side, the right side of his face, and the left, like it looks super real, except for that it's almost looks super narrow, like something happened. Like why does it not?
Like why is his face so narrow?
Yeah, there's a line that makes it look almost square or rectangle. You know.
Yeah. Well, part of that's kind of a fold because you can see it continues up past his hair. That line. So some of this is just like artifacts in the fabric, being old and folded multiple times and stuff, just like the horizontal line at the bottom. But I mean, actually, the narrowness of the face is a really interesting thing because, they've done all these studies trying to disprove this. And they say something that Shroud proponents agree with now. It's a weird sort of it's like a straw man refutation where they say, hey, if you transferred an image of a body to a cloth, it would be distorted. It'd be warped because like the cloth would wrap around the sides of your face, right? And you'd have like the super wide face. It's called Agamemnon's mask effect. There's a name for it. And that's not the case with the
circumference, right? Instead of the diameter.
And they say, well, that's not the case with the shroud. So clearly it's not a transfer of fluid. And so, I mean, obviously the proponents agree with that. They think it is some sort of transfer of energy. But even with a light, like a traditional light source, which again, I know it sounds crazy to talk about, but hey, we're just trying to think this through. What is it? Because it exists and it's weird. So we've got to try to explain it. Even with the light, you would expect it to like be distorted. You wouldn't expect it to be such a clean, just perfect transfer. And this is a characteristic that's odd to explain both for the pro shroud people and the, hoax shroud camp. It's odd. There are ideas about it and we can talk about them. I mean, maybe that's a segue to go into Da Vinci potentially.
Well, what's not yet? What's the thing about, like, look at the other interesting part to me is up on the crown of his head here.
Yeah.
And then that shape, it almost looks like it seems weird that there would be some sort of, I mean, it looks
actually,
like, I guess on this thing.
That would have been the top of his head, wouldn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's one of the interesting things about this, which makes the idea of it being an art piece seem even more unlikely, but who knows? Is that the linen, the body would have been laid on the linen. So its back would have been on the linen. And then the linen's folded over the top of his head and put in front of his body. So if you look at the full shroud image, Darren, if you can find one of those, you see the frontal and dorsal. There's an image of both the front of his body and the back. And so that where it wraps around the top of his head, it's just hair. So it's not super detailed. And you see the kind of those like interesting things. And so that makes the idea of it being like an artistic rendition of like maybe like a narrow statue even more complicated. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying it gets more complicated. Click that one. It's on the second row, all the way on the right.
This one?
Is that it?
Sorry.
No?
That's it. That's it. But go back just so you can see the whole thing at once. It's pretty big. It's, they kind of estimate he's about, just shy of 6 feet tall. But there's one that kind of shows the front and the back. It's okay. But
wasn't even 6 feet tall. Come on.
Well, that would have been super. That would have been really tall for back then. That's actually one of the criticisms is he's too tall. But I don't know. It's who knows? But
did you kick me out, Darren? How come
I didn't kick you out. No.
Kick me out. This one with the front and the back. This one.
That's a way to see it. Yeah, definitely. But anyway, so that thing you're pointing out,
What's that
Graham,
other face
it's
on
just the
there?
top of his head.
Looks like
Oh, yeah, right. I see.
It
What's that?
looks like Biggie Smalls down there on the bottom with his glasses on.
Now you gotta show me. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know what he's talking about either.
Are you talking about the footprints?
Are those footprints? The footprints.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
black
And that's another thing that's pretty interesting is it, it looks like that right foot is dislocated because the footprint is flat. There's a lot of forensic and anatomical detail in this linen. I mean, you guys can't even imagine how much this thing has been studied. I mean, people say that it's the most studied artifact of all time. I don't know if that's true. I think it's
Who
probably
gets
hard.
to study it?
Lots of people. I mean, so let me.
Could you apply and you get to go hang out with the Shroud, or do you have to be
I
like?
don't think so. Let me kind of tell the story of the first two times it was studied and all the controversy that has ensued in modern times. So in the 70s, there was this team of like physicists, electrical engineers, all these different, super well qualified Los Alamos Labs, NASA people. They put this team together. There's like 40 people, 26 people ended up going, and they studied it for like 120 continuous hours.
I'm shocked that this thing didn't just get thrown away. I mean, really, is it someone just hung on to this piece of cloth for thousands of years and they got to study it? Really is pretty remarkable.
Its historical chain of custody is pretty fascinating. I mean,
I'd like to hear that too, of how it made it all this time at some point.
To me, it's pretty convincingly well documented, but obviously, the skeptical position is just like, no, you're wrong. You're stupid. Stop.
So the deniers, the skeptics, when they say counterfeit, because do they think it was counterfeit recently in the 50s, like in the modern era, or was counterfeit a couple hundred years ago, or when do they think the counterfeit was created? Like, when is there like a?
Well, let me try to make the very clear secular skeptical case for it being a medieval hoax first, and then we'll kind of get into its issues. So, its historical origin was sort of unclear. We know for sure it showed up in the 14th century. This French knight maybe got it from Athens. We don't know where he got it from. I think we do, but the skeptical position is it just sort of appeared, probably made by an artist in France in the 14th century, and in this town called Lire. And so this really famous French knight had it, and then we can trace it from there all the way to modern day, Turin in Italy. But we didn't really place a huge emphasis on that 14th century date at first, because there's a story that takes it all the way back to the 5th century too. And so it wasn't until 1989 when the Vatican said we want to carbon date this thing. And so they invited a bunch of labs to apply. They selected teams from Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona, University of Arizona. And so they go out, and it's sort of controversial, and they just basically cut a corner off of it, and they dated it. And they dated it to 1325. It was a big range, but 1325 was the middle range. And that aligns really well with the sort of maybe 1355-ish emergence by this knight in France. And they say, okay, it's a medieval hoax. So in 1989, it was pretty clear that Shroud of Turin is a medieval forgery. How was it made? I don't know. No one really even speculated. It's super interesting.
At that point, they probably didn't even really care how it was made, because they didn't realize there was all these crazy attributes to it.
Yeah, and they just, if there are crazy attributes, it's like, well, that sort of interesting, but who cares, basically. And so, it was pretty much like relegated to like an image of the Virgin Mary and a grilled cheese sandwich kind of idea. Like it was just like this silly, superstitious thing. It wasn't until some people started trying to get the data from that study. It was a big paper, it was a Nature paper, and were denied. That people started saying, well, like, that's odd. You're supposed to share data, especially in Nature. That's something they really kind of make sure you do. They wouldn't share data. They wouldn't really share detailed methods. So people started trying to analyze the publicly available results, and they started getting pretty serious problems. Like the biggest problem is that you can map spatially the hundreds of little bits of sample that were taken from this tiny little piece of cloth that they cut, right? You know which lab got which sample, and you know which part of which sample each lab used and what date they got for it. So you can map all the dates, and what you see is there's a linear trend. So the shroud gets younger as you move from left to right. And so, and the trend is so strong and so significant that, the shroud would have to be created in the future by the time you get to the other side of the shroud, right? So it's a really strong linear trend. And so it's a systematic error. And you're not supposed to publish systematic error. Systematic error means it's not just random variance in your method. There's something wrong, right? And so the labs, they did a good job. They also dated known 2,000-year-old cloths, and they all got 2,000 years across the board with very little error. With the shroud, there's huge error. One lab got this result, one lab got that result, one lab got this result, and the error was so big that they shouldn't really have even combined the numbers into a single confidence interval, but they did. And anyway, we didn't really know this until somebody filed a Freedom of Information Act. His name's Tristan Casabianca, French researcher. I think he's kind of a historian, statistician, kind of a weird combination of things. The perfect guy for this problem. And he got all the sealed. Why it was sealed, I don't know, but he got it released. He got all the data. And they basically show that carbon date is just not to be taken seriously. But it's a problem because we had just spent 20 years just so confident that it was medieval that it's hard to snap ourselves out of that. I liken it to a judge saying if a witness comes up and said, he did it, and I know he did it, and the judge says, hey, strike that from the record, pretend like you never heard it, right? It's you can't undo the fact that you heard him say that, right? And so that's sort of what happened here. And so, yeah, so basically all of a sudden in 2015, we're oh, maybe this thing is real again. And we started looking into it again. But that's a skeptical view that it showed up in the 14th century, made by an artist, confirmed by carbon dating. But, for a lot of reasons, that's probably not the case.
What was the dating you talked about on our show? I thought you had some dates that came in closer to 2,000 years.
Yeah, it's tough to the people. It's the people who get the medieval dates, they're shroud skeptics, and the people who get the first century dates are shroud proponents. It's weird. I mean, science is not supposed to work this way, but it unfortunately tends to. But there are, I would say, from what I can tell, credible first century dating. So there's some based on X-ray scatter. And so you can study the way the linen fibers scatter X-ray, and it looks like a 2,000-year-old piece of linen. They have other 2,000-year-old pieces of linen that they can compare it to.
And how was that? How was that error? The error that showed up, that linear error. How did that present itself?
They don't really have as large of a sample. I mean, they're dating threads. They're dating linen threads, so they can't really do a systematic. But let me kind of explain why that systematic error is so important. Is that at one point the shroud did catch fire, and 500 years ago it caught fire. It was in a silver casket. The Savoys, they fell in love with it, they worshipped it, literally. It was like a cult. And so they venerated it.
When did that happen? When was the fire?
1530, something like that. And so,
carbon from the fire would be what they were.
Yeah, I mean that or they repaired it. They repaired it. They stitched pieces of cloth into it. Now there's a lot of controversy about this too. There's arguments on both sides, but it does seem like it was repaired, and the edges were repaired, and that's where the sample was taken from. And there's contaminants in it. There's cotton in the sample, and it's a linen cloth, right? So there's and there's blue threads and red threads, and there's material and stuff. And so yeah, it's a mess.
How big of a sample do they need? Can't they just take a little chunk right out of the forehead?
No, they won't do it. Yeah.
No way. No.
Yeah, there's no way. I mean, it was very controversial even to cut the corner off.
They haven't come up with a non-destructive way to do this yet.
I think it's safe to say that all of the non-destructive dating says it's probably 2,000 years old.
2,000 years old. So at this point, it's the debunkers that are looking for different ways to test it and prove that it's otherwise. Okay.
Right. Oh, go ahead.
No, you continue.
I would say even the pro shroud people are yeah, let's carbon date right in the middle of the thing. Like they just want to know too, I would say. I haven't heard a lot of people other than like the church themselves, not want to destructively date it. But it would kind of be a shame. It's been around for maybe 2,000 years old to just, cut the forehead out
Yeah,
of
but
it. I don't.
what better reason could there be for that thing to exist than to prove the existence of Christ? Like
Yeah.
honestly, if they get cut out the belly button and be like, man, it's it that we can't, carbon dating proves it too, then in some ways it would be worth it. It'll accomplish more. The shroud would accomplish more than it ever will hanging around in the museum.
Yeah. I mean,
Is it in a museum? Can we just
it's
go
not even
see it?
it's not even in
No.
a museum. It's in a crypt somewhere.
So it's just
They put
like
it on
box
display.
something?
Yeah. They put it on display every once in a while under guard and stuff. But I mean, so there is a perspective on this. This is not really a part of my normal spiel, but some of the like Giulio Fonti, he's one of the big pro shroud guys. I mean, his view, and we haven't even gotten really to the evidence, but his view is the evidence is pretty overwhelming. It's really way more than you should reasonably hope for a 2,000-year-old artifact. you know, if it was any more definitive, then you really wouldn't have a choice to choose whether or not to believe in Christ, right? And that's part of the deal. It's not supposed to be definitive. There's this aspect of belief. And so he kind of feels like it's really as good as you can reasonably hope for. Um, and that's an interesting perspective. I don't know. I mean, it is. I mean, if this was an image of Alexander the Great, we'd be like, yeah, 100%, it's real. It's the fact that it points to like an act. The resurrection is very controversial, obviously. So I mean, I can tell you maybe the most bizarre take that's actually compelling to me. Um, and so, let's just entertain for a second that was created by some type of energy. You know, I hear the word energy and I think, okay, energy, that's a scientific word. Some people hear the word energy and they say, well, this is like divine or something. I don't know. But if it was just light, if it was just UV light, I think you could create an image with UV light that looks really similar. Monochromatic. It has an inverse correlation between distance from the body and the cloth, which we see, which is difficult to explain by any other means other than light. But I think it would be more warped. I don't think it would be quite so just crystal clear and beautiful. So speaking of Giulio Fonti, he is one of the few people who's been able to image the back of the cloth because the cloth is in a case and they don't generally take it out anymore. But he imaged it, at some time with scientific grade equipment. And, his position is that there is another set of images on the back of the cloth that correspond to the front geometrically. And you can look at his paper. And so there are critics that say we need to verify it again. But for now, I mean, he's got this paper published and he calls that double superficiality. And the superficiality part is interesting. It's not paint. I mean, I don't think anyone credibly claims it to be paint at this point. It is an incredibly superficial image, like less than 200 nanometers. And it's just the outermost linen threads that are discolored and they're discolored circumferentially. So it's like they were exposed to some kind of energy or radiation or something. But what's interesting is there's that other image on the back. Oops, sorry. So you have two superficial images with untouched cloth in between. That's just not something that paint does, right? And he's been able to recreate that with corona discharge.
Wait, untouched cloth in between. So the image was on the outside of the cloth, not the inside?
Yeah. Yeah. Just the very, very outermost layers of threads are circumferentially discolored, not by pigment, but they're like chemically altered. And he's sort of recreated this with corona discharge, that's plasma. If you've ever played with one of those plasma balls, you put your hand on the outside and all the plasma goes to you. It's UV light guided by an electrical field. And so this is sort of his take that is how you could transfer an image without distortion using energy. And so how that would occur is, the body would have to be an intense energy source of some kind. And so, are there any events in that time frame that might create a huge source of energy? Well, their argument would be the resurrection. And I know it sounds crazy, but I think maybe it is, I don't know, but there's not really many other compelling arguments. We can talk about some of them, but do you guys have any thoughts
I'd like
on
to
that?
hear some of them. I'd like to. Well, yeah, I'd like to hear some of them.
Okay. So remind me at some point we should probably talk about the longer history. We should talk about the anatomy. We should talk about the forensic stuff. But yes, I think it'd be good. I think it'd be good to talk about, probably one of the more popular ideas right now, which is like Da Vinci did it. Um, so I think maybe
When's Da Vinci's time? When's he alive?
he's about 150 years after the youngest date for the shroud, the 1325 date. So
he's like
he wouldn't have
1500.
been around. What's that?
He's around 1500.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
So he would, it's 1475, something like that. I don't remember exactly, but it's outside. He wouldn't have been around to make it, unless you want to entertain that it's actually even younger than we have like unanimously agree it is. Yeah, maybe. The reason people like Da Vinci for it is because he had this camera obscura idea. And this was this idea that you could like make a dark room and poke a tiny little hole in the wall or even like a box. And whatever that tiny little hole is pointed towards, like a building, that image would be projected onto like a piece of canvas inside. And you could use this to like trace. It was like a type of medieval photography, kind of. And the idea is hypothetically 100 and 50 years earlier, you could make a big version of this, and you could put a 14-foot long cloth linen that's dipped in like photoreactive solvent, which they didn't know how to do back then, right? And you could take a big biconvex quartz lens, which they also didn't have back then, that size, and you could hang either a corpse, probably not a corpse because a corpse would decay, or a statue, a reflective statue. And you could basically take a photograph of the front and back of the statue. And so that's called camera obscura. You can look up camera
Would
obscura
that be the
images.
same idea as like how people look at the eclipse with
Yeah, kind of
they
like that.
poke a
Yeah.
hole in the paper and shine it on another piece of paper?
Yeah, and then except, you would dip that paper in like a photoreactive solvent, and then you would need to have like like maybe urine, a bucket of urine in there. So the the uric, I don't know what the actual compound is, uric acid, something nitrogenous to fix.
Ammonia, I think.
Yeah, something to fix the photograph. So when you open the door, it's not developed and ruined. Yeah, I mean, a couple of things emerge. One, we have no reason to believe any of those capabilities existed. Two, are there any other examples? No. So it's a stretch, man. But yeah, is it technically maybe possible? Yes, except images taken that way now, because we recreate this in modern times. They don't look like the shroud. They look like photographs, because that's what they are. They're photographs. They're not, so you would need to devise a situation where the statue itself glowed, and you would have to take this image at night. So now we're just entertaining like wild ideas, and if maybe the
Well, maybe. I
resurrection's
mean,
a
with
wild idea. Yeah.
or with plasma technology or the Egyptians. I mean, there were there is ways that, I mean, if you look at the alchemy now and the making of mana and the Ark of the Covenant, I mean, they were generating this light. I mean, it was this light and energy. They say, the Templars talked about it. So they might have had access to certain types of electricity that we just can't imagine.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, but I think you have to, either way, you have to be willing to entertain some wild ideas, which is why it's interesting, I think, but the idea that it's like painted is there's no evidence for
Yeah,
it.
it seems like it would have to be from, like you said, from a 3D, like sort of from an energy, from something draped over a 3D thing, like a statue
There,
or a body or something.
but then there's other problems with that too, because there is forensic evidence. There's like fluid blood discharge where at the wound where the spear pierced Jesus. There's evidence of dislocation of the ankle. So the people who are using this technology, this like hypothetical technology, would have to be really motivated to imprint evidence of the crucifixion into the cloth too. So yeah, I mean, it's possible. I don't know. There are also blood stains, and the blood stains occurred before the image transfer because the image didn't transfer in the areas where the blood is. And so the timeline for the crucifixion and resurrection is pretty like tightly encoded into the shroud. I mean, there's serum edges around the blood stains, which means the cloth would have had to come into contact with the blood as it's already coagulating, you know. So
Have they done DNA analysis on that?
there's not really DNA in the way we would think of DNA. I mean, there's fragments. You know, they've found all sorts of fragments that no, there's not really anything interesting. There's there's maybe some evidence of high bilirubin and creatinine, which you know the pro shroud people interpret as like evidence of a tortured man. Maybe I don't know. There's red blood cells. There's all sorts of different blood chemicals. Yeah, but not really DNA that we could sequence reliably. No.
Can't 23andMe that thing?
No, unfortunately, no. But yeah, so then we get to like, okay, what are some other skeptical things, or what? I mean, what is actually in the image? I guess is an interesting question. It's a tortured man. You know, there's evidence of a Roman flagrum being used on a body. You know, there's lashings, and there's lashings of a particular shape that are that correspond to Roman crucifixion. And there's a nail wound potentially through the wrist, which is odd because all medieval paintings of the crucifixion, sorry, have the nail going through the hand, you know? And so if this was made in medieval times, why would they do it this way? You know, why would they add that controversy? There's evidence of an ankle dislocation, which would be, you know, would make sense if the feet were nailed to the cross, but most medieval depictions of the crucifixion have it on like a footrest, you know. So yeah, I don't know. I think the medieval idea makes no sense. And I think increasingly even the skeptics are coming around to that. So then the question is, well, who made it? You know, who made it 2,000 years ago, or is it real? I don't know. We don't really have the evidence to say one way or the other. I mean, both ideas are tough to wrap your head around. I mean, personally, I tend to believe it's real, you know.
Yeah.
But
Wow. Was that part of your becoming a Christian? Or was this after? Was the shroud pilling afterwards?
I think the shroud pilling was afterwards. Yeah. Yeah. I became interested in it during that time, but yeah, I would say the shroud pilling was afterwards. Yeah. So you caught on to the name of the book. Yes.
Oh yeah.
It's sort of, I think it is kind of a red pill moment for a lot of folks. I mean, I think a lot of folks get into it, and I don't know. It's yeah, it's tough to explain, man. I think if you're honest, you know, the skeptics aren't honest, and the super gung ho Catholic researchers, I'm not going to say they're not honest, but they have a perspective. You know, they're biased, right? Um, but everyone in between, if you're honest, you have to admit it's pretty remarkable. It's tough to explain. But
Was there that fire that happened? Was it an accident, or were they somebody trying to destroy it?
yeah, I don't know, but I think it was an accident. There's actually been a couple a couple fires in the Shroud's history. Speaking of the history, I mean, we can talk about historical evidences before medieval time. What do you guys want to talk about?
Well, I want to know if was the resurrection itself added later on in the literature.
What do you mean?
Well, I thought I read something recently that it wasn't part of the original.
Oh, like a biblical accuracy type of thing. Yeah, no, I mean, this is a popular thing going on. I mean, this is something, you know, like I've heard Billy Carson and others say that like the oldest versions of the Bible don't have the crucifixion. That, you know, that's not the case as far as I know. Like the Codex Sinaiticus, which is sort of the oldest complete Bible, has pretty much reads like our current Bible. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But you know, you could find like other texts that are difficult to date that don't have it or say it didn't happen. Yeah. You know, but they're not a part of like the oldest Bibles that we have. They wouldn't have even been called the Bible at that time. They're just a collection of books, have the gospel accounts. in them. So yeah.
What if it's older? Could it be older?
Maybe. I mean, no
Because
one's
you know
really
how
making
there's all
that case, but
you have all these different earlier sort of religions and faiths that seem to match the Bible in a a lot. Then
yeah.
a lot of
You
them
mean you're talking
predate
about
it.
the
So
Old Testament?
yeah, or even
Yeah.
like what was it? The popular one, Zeitgeist, right? Where it goes to the beginning and compares it to all these
Oh yeah.
ancient sort of religions that have all these same sort of themes in them. I'm wondering if there's a chance that that thing is even older than that, because that could kind of push back the whole Jesus story, in my opinion, way farther too. And it's just like, it's because it would seem like they're all talking about the same thing, and they've just sort of picked different starting lines, or however that happened, or that same sort of thing keeps happening. But to me, it would seem more logical that all these ancient religions were talking about the same thing that the new religions are, and
Yeah.
that Jesus or whatever could be a lot older than 2,000 years.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not really like an expert on like comparative theology or mythology. I mean, the times I have kind of dived into that, I've found myself to be kind of underwhelmed by the zeitgeist perspective. Although I'm fascinated by that. I watched that in college and was like, oh yeah, I'm an atheist now, or not even an atheist, but like whatever.
Well, to me, I mean, all that stuff in Zeitgeist, there's less evidence there towards atheism and more evidence towards something is going on here. All
yeah,
these
yeah.
ancient religions aren't doing the same thing for no reason. There's something going on there other than just hijacking.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, certainly for the Old Testament,
If you're
I
just
would agree.
hijacking, you'd
Yeah,
come up with something better,
right, right.
honestly, you could come up with something that was easier to get people in line, or whatever
Yeah.
the different reasons they say the Bible could have been written for. You could have come up with a better way, to like make slaves.
When I read like some of the, Sumerian stuff, sure does sound a lot like the Old Testament. I mean, to me, it sounds like the other perspective. Like it kind of paints like the Lucifer figure in the positive light, and the kind of the Torah is sort of like the other perspective, but it's telling the same story. It's, telling the story of like a god or council of gods created humans, and civilization flourished but became evil and was therefore destroyed. And that, we're kind of the next version. We're version 2. As far as Jesus goes, I mean, I know people make the connection with some of the Egyptian Osiris virgin birth kind of stuff, but I don't know. I would just encourage people to look into it. The virgin birth story isn't really there in Osiris. The 3-day thing is there. That's interesting, actually. I agree.
A 3-day is
Yeah,
everywhere. I did a whole
yeah,
presentation on it. 3 days is all over the place.
but that's not really a huge part of the Gospels. I mean, I encourage people to read the Gospels and not in like a what's the word?
Well, the 2 big ones are from the Bible, though. I mean, Jesus' resurrection and Jonah and the whale, they're both 3 days,
Yeah,
right? So,
yeah, yeah.
it's those are the
He's
2 main.
resurrected. It's kind of 48 hours, but it's the way we would consider days. Like it's the 3rd day, right? I agree. Um,
But
but yeah, it's
I
uh,
think that it gives Jesus I think it gives it the way I've been thinking about it recently, this whole
yeah,
syncretic
yeah.
thing, is it gives it more I think it gives it more power, and because it
It's a
talks
theme. Yeah,
because this sort of this
yeah,
is a truth, a deeper truth than just one religion, if there's this truth in all of them, that the kingdom of God is within you type thing and all this. I mean, Jesus's
yeah,
message itself, these mystery traditions and the Templars and all this stuff, they seem to think that they seem to think of Christianity as true. It's just they look at it from more of an overall perspective instead of just through the
yeah.
Bible, I think. So to me, it gives it kind of more weight. That's the way I've been looking at it recently. But
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that is sort of my perspective as well. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not super dogmatic about it. I mean, if we are kind of more talking about like my personal kind of how I came to this perspective, I just kind of started reading the book and I was like, "Oh, yeah, this isn't exactly what I expected," So, I definitely encourage people to give it a shot if you want, but that's I'll leave it at that as far as preaching goes. As far as this cloth, I mean, it's evidence of something. I don't know what, but it's evidence
What
of
test
something.
would, if you could get your hands on that thing, what would you do? What test would you do to it? What do you think the definitive test could be to prove it? Because carbon dating is just going to be more arguing. Half the time I don't believe the carbon dating. I'm like, yeah, I don't know, really, by the half-life of some bullshit. I mean, I believe you found a pattern. Whether or
Yeah,
not that pattern is repeatable to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, et cetera, years, that I don't know. The pattern might not be that it might not keep
yeah.
repeating in the way that we think it does. But there's got to be, I mean, to me, when I look at that, it's probably the negative and the 3D thing that are the most compelling. So what do you
Yeah.
think, if you had it, what test do you think, what would you do to that thing?
The negative, the
Maybe you can
3D.
burn it. You should try burning it. I mean, maybe it caught on fire all these times and they repaired it because the metal just won't burn.
Maybe, I don't know, man. Um, the negative, the 3D, and the superficial nature of the image are, I think, the most compelling. I don't know if there's a test I'm aware of that would other than, like you said, like carbon dating it all over the place by tons of different independent labs. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's I don't think we can know. I mean, I think that's ultimate not to be I think that's the conclusion I've come to is the evidence, seems to point to it being 2,000 years old. And uh, evidence of the crucifixion and maybe the resurrection. I don't know what tests we could do. I don't. That's
Is
maybe
a
not a good
crazy one.
answer, but
What
yeah.
about evidence of I mean, what if it's
I should add it. It's probably not burned into the cloth because burns fluoresce under UV, and the shroud image doesn't fluoresce. The bloodstains do, which is what you would expect, like in a CSI drama. You put your UV light, the blood lights up. The bloodstains do fluoresce, but the image does not, and burns or scorches do. So it is. The linen is chemically altered in the image areas, and this is actually like something that one of the reasons why Protestants did not think it was real is because it's not really in the Gospels. Now it's weird though because it is. I don't really understand this argument fully, but in John in particular, he goes into the tomb and he says, he sees the strips of linen lying there. He sees a face cloth folded in the corner, which people claim to be the Sudarium of Oviedo, which is in Spain. But he sees the face cloth folded up next to the other linen. And so people say, like, well, they would have seen this image. But first of all, I would say look at it not in negative. If you haven't seen a lot of, like, that's why most people assumed it was just like a stain, because that's what it looks like. I mean, even the evidence of it being in Constantinople in like the 10th century, people just assumed it was a stain. So I don't think they would have mentioned it. But also, it's possible that the linen was altered very, slightly. The cellulose in the linen fibers was altered by maybe UV. It might not have looked like that at first. This might be what it looks like hundreds of years later as it
what if
ages
it was
differently.
lying around and the sun went like supernova?
Yeah, what? Yeah, I don't know.
No, but I thought about that too, a celestial event or something. Yeah.
Well, yeah,
while
because there's
while
I think
someone's in it, yeah, yeah,
there's evidence that all of this stuff could be allegory for cyclical cataclysm. I mean, Chan Thomas thought Adam that the start of the Bible, that Adam and Eve and all that they were the survivors of the cataclysm before Noah's flood, and then the next
yeah.
cataclysm being Noah's flood. And I'm just wondering if Jesus was just lying around when that shit happened somehow, or if all that stuff could be somehow intertwined together, maybe. But I'm wondering, I guess,
I
if
don't
a
know.
celestial event could do it
I
somehow.
mean, there was an eclipse during the crucifixion. We know that, I think, pretty well. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not
But that
sure.
wouldn't do it, right? That wouldn't.
No, I mean, it's I don't know. At some point, it's just like, oh, it's up to you to just sort of decide what you believe. I mean, it seems like the body emitted energy. Could that be related to a celestial event? Sure. I don't know. Maybe. Um, it's the forensic evidence and the image together that are so compelling. Like the forensic evidence by itself, I don't know. Whatever. I don't know. But it's the oddities of the image with the fact that the blood stains are there first, They match the crucifixion account. There's a lance wound at the side, which isn't really pure blood. It's blood and water, just like the crucifixion account, you know. There's crown of thorns, blood on the forehead. It's, I don't know, man. It is kind of interesting. But could it be man-made? I wouldn't like be shook if somehow they proved it was man-made. I cannot even fathom how. And certainly not 700 years ago, which is sort of the skeptical claim. Now
Is
there
any
are
chance it could have been done more recently? Like, when did this sort of get into the public eye then? Like you said, we can track
1350.
1350. Is that like
Yeah.
with people we can trust, or is that like the Vatican?
Hundreds, maybe thousands of people would have seen it.
Okay.
It was displayed at a cathedral in France.
So there's no way they just whipped it up in the 50s or something like that.
No. Well, let me tell that story real
Oh,
quick.
wait. What could they
Yeah.
have switched it out?
Yeah, maybe, but the descriptions of it are pretty, the chances of me finding the page on the fly here are not good, but the descriptions of it from 1,000 years ago kind of sound like it today. I mean, I don't know. But yeah,
Plus,
it's
plus you
possible.
still have to make it. I mean, plus, you still have
Still
to
have to
figure
make
out how to make the real.
Well, in my theory, it would be obviously they would make it the exact. They would have taken the shroud and then done the magic and then put the new, it would have been an exact replica just with supernatural powers. But I don't know how to, I guess that would depend on like if you could make a shroud today somehow, like if you could just like somehow do it.
Yeah, they've played around with laser, they've played around with plasma. Plasma's, I would say, you get the closest with a plasma energy source and like an item. Like they've turned like a gear into the small electric, because like if you think of like a plasma energy ball thing, you have the smaller electrode and then you have the like dielectric glass or something, and then you have the electrical currents that run between and guide the UV light out. That creates the superficial image discoloration, monochromatic, inverse distance to cloth ratio, and double superficiality. That checks all the boxes.
So if
So
you got struck by lightning, then could that do it?
something like that's been proposed, like that there was like an earthquake and lightning or something occurred and it struck a body and a cloth and transferred the image. I don't know. It does. The problem is the forensic evidence. So like that might explain the image formation process, but it needs to explain the image formation process and the forensic evidence. So I don't know. It's tough. It's like it would have been tough. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible.
To me, that it's one of those things that gets more complicated. The best mysteries just get more complicated the more technology you get, right? Like the pyramids, you'd think by now we'd have it figured out, and they just keep getting weirder. The shroud just keeps getting, they're like.
It reminds me of the pyramids.
Because
of the dating and stuff. Yeah.
It's like just the more stuff we get is just, it just makes the mystery even bigger.
Yeah.
Is this a book then? Are you writing a book about the? There we go. Shroud-Pilled.
Shroud-Pilled. There we go.
Oh, you put your name on it though.
Yeah, I did. No, I'm not like freaked out about it. It's just so for people who are listening, so by day, mainstream researcher applying for federal funds and stuff. So I'm trying to manage my Google image when people search my name for mainstream reasons. But no, I'm not like a freak about it. My name's on the book. Check it out. Shroud-Pilled, Trevor Lohman. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, so I think we got to talk about the history for a second. So
yeah, I wanted to know about the chain of custody a little bit more. Yeah.
It's not perfect, man, but I mean, I don't know how many 2,000 relics we have perfect chains of custody for. So this guy, this knight, Descharnay, he's French. I don't know how to pronounce his name.
Descharnay.
Yeah, Descharnay. He shows up 1349. We have evidence of written letters that he has the shroud.
Was he a Templar?
I don't know.
Because maybe. Oh,
did he already know of it? Did they must already known of its significance then at that time even?
He believed right off the bat it was what people say it is today in the Vatican, that it's an image of Christ. So, but he escaped an English war prison after saying a prayer. I don't know if he was Christian beforehand, but he prayed to escape and he escaped, and it felt miraculous to him. So when he got home, he said, "I'm building a church. I'm building a cathedral." and he was rich. He was a famous knight, brave, died defending the king of France, right? And so he had money. He built a cathedral. The cathedral up the road, people stopped going to it. Everyone was going to Lire to see the shroud of Christ, right? And so that guy wrote a letter to the Pope saying it was fake. And so that's kind of used as evidence that it's fake today by the skeptics, because he said that he heard from another guy equally offended by the shroud that he had the artist. He got someone to confess, unnamed. We don't know. And so the Pope said, okay, it was kind of a back and forth. They took it down at one point. They put it back up with a little disclaimer that said, this is just not, it's not really the cloth or whatever. I don't know. And it eventually makes its way to today with a really good chain of custody. We know from Lire to today where it went pretty well. The question is, where did it come from? Well, de Charny, he just got home from the Fourth Crusade, and the Fourth Crusade went to Athens. At one point, Fourth Crusade was weird. I'm not like a great historian on this stuff, but the Western Christian army turned on the Eastern, on Constantinople. They sacked Constantinople in 1204. It's a huge part of the Eastern Orthodox Catholic division is this like horrible event, right? And so there's lots of written letters that the shroud, I can read you one. There's lots of written letters. So it said, and so this is like a weird curiosity of the French language that I'll explain. It's going to sound weird, but so it says, where there was a shroud in which our Lord had been wrapped, which every Friday raised itself upright so one could see the figure of our Lord on it, and none knows, neither Greek nor Frank, what became of the shroud when the city was taken. And so raised itself up just means like someone raised it up, like they would display it every Friday. So this is in the 13th century, or I'm sorry, this is from 944 to 1204. It was in Constantinople. And then someone says the Venetians partitioned the treasures of gold, silver, and ivory, while the French did the same with the relics of the saints, and the most sacred of all, the linen in which our Lord Jesus Christ was wrapped after his death and before the resurrection. We know that the sacred objects are preserved by their predators in Venice, in France, and in other places, the sacred linen in Athens. And so that's interesting because we know the Shroud of Constantinople was in Constantinople from 944 to 1204. And the city was sacked in 1204, and the shroud went to Athens. And de Charny was in Athens right before he got home with the shroud, or he was at least in Greece. And so it kind of makes sense that a wealthy French knight, with the king's backing on the crusade, goes to where they know they hid the shroud after the sacking of Constantinople and returns home with it.
Wow.
It checks out.
I love it.
Then yeah, and so in the descriptions of the Shroud of Constantinople, I mean, they sound just like the Shroud of Turin. And so there's kind of this joke, like it's almost like armchair historians just Googled, like that's why I mentioned engram earlier, like usage of the word Shroud of Turin. And they said, oh, no one's ever used the word Shroud of Turin before 1530. Well, before that, it was the Shroud of Lire. Well, no one ever used the term Shroud of Lire before 1350. Well, before that, it was the Shroud of Constantinople. And before it was the Shroud of Constantinople, it was the Shroud of Edessa. And that goes all the way back to the 5th century. And there's icon images, paintings of the shroud, and it kind of looks like the Shroud of Turin. So there's reasonable, like if it was any other artifact, we'd have no problem saying like, oh yeah, 5th century, 4th century. And then before that, there are accounts of disciples giving it to King Abgar in the 2nd century. So who knows?
I like it.
What do you guys think?
What it's worth, the AI says the AI doesn't know. He's like, it's credible evidence in both directions.
It's murky. And the shroud's origins before the 1350s are murky, says Grok. But get this. De Charny was not a knight, a member of the Knights Templar, because they were disbanded by 1312. My point was that they weren't really, allegedly. Yeah. But get this, by Pope Clement V under pressure from King Philip IV of France, right, with their leaders, including a different knight named Geoffrey de Charny.
Yeah.
It was executed in 1314, burned at the stake.
So this is another weird kind of fringe theory, is that I write about this in the book. I don't know.
Oh, wow.
So there's this other guy with almost the same name, spelled slightly differently, who underwent like a mock crucifixion earlier. I think in England, or France, I don't know. And so there's this idea that somehow he created the shroud image during his mock crucifixion because they wrapped him in linen and subjected him to like high temperatures and then burned him. It's not really clear at all. Like the evidence is odd, but he was a Knight Templar. And so the idea is that he was a relative because their names are spelled differently.
Right.
But that's really the only connection. I don't know. But hey, I mean, who knows, man? Who knows?
Especially if they were still, underground, like they say they were, right? I mean, apparently they knew that was coming down, and they had time to flee. So
yeah, yeah. That says there's credible evidence on both sides. That's true. Although I would say, like, really, the credible evidence on the skeptical side it really just comes down to like, man, it just can't be real. that's a really like that really is the argument. Like, it just can't be.
plus it's Christian too. I mean, if
Right.
that makes it worse, there's still like a bit of a war on Christianity right
It's
now.
it's very offensive, especially in like Christian society, which is unusual. I don't know for a Christian society, but it's very offensive to scientists, skeptics,
Yeah.
that there would be physical evidence of something like this. It just,
Yeah.
it's because
If there was
if you think-
evidence on the Shroud of Transition, then they'd tell us it was.
they'd love it. They'd love. So don't get me in trouble, man. So
Well, wait till the Ark of Covenant comes out of the Templar vault. We'll see what they say about that.
Okay, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, there's just I've thought about this a lot. Like, if you're a Christian, most Christians assumed it was fake until very recently, until the carbon dating was disproven and all this stuff. So I think if you're a Christian, like, you want it to be real, but you're not like, I think your bias is reasonable, it should be acknowledged, but yeah, I think you can study it. I think you can do research, and they do. Most of the peer reviewed scientific research on the shroud actually comes out of the Christian camp, really the Catholic camp specifically. But if you are a skeptic, it can't be real, right? Like, you cannot accept it as real. That
No
would
matter what.
completely,
No
it
matter
completely
what.
undermine your worldview. So their argumentation tends to be pretty emotional. Not always, but if you like go read the sewers of the Reddit blogs and stuff, it's really emotional. Like, it's angry. It doesn't feel well reasoned. And so it's a weird situation where like the believers tend to be more scientific on this issue,
Yeah.
which is usually not the case. But yeah.
That makes
Wow.
sense. I like that.
What is the book out now? Can people get the book now, or when does it come out?
Book's out. Yeah, it's on Amazon. Shroud-Pilled. Check it out. I've got another book, God's Eye View. That's more my wheelhouse of science.
Is it on audio yet?
The God's Eye View is on audio, but Shroud-Pilled is not.
Are you going to read it?
You guys interested?
We're always interested.
After doing the audiobook on God's Eye View, I'm like, yeah, I never want to do an audiobook again. So I admire you, Graham.
Exactly how you feel. I've
There's
worked
even
on one for months that is just like, oh my God. It's like, is there anything else on my list of things I can do today instead of read this book?
It's brutal, man. I went back and listened to it. I published it without listening to it. I'm like, I can't. I'm done. And it's good. I'm not trying to like get people not to buy it. Please check it out. But there's a few times I just repeated the same sentence twice. And I'm like, I cannot even open Audacity. Like, I do not even want to edit anything ever again. So if you do buy the audiobook, there's a couple errors in there. But yeah, man, audio editing. I don't know how you guys do it. And the reading, oh, Graham, you're impressive, man.
Thanks, man. Yeah, every day. I do it every day. I was thinking about this morning because I started a new book after I finished an old one. I'm like, do I keep going today? I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna plow through. I gotta keep going. Like, I really try and force myself every day to do it. So
yeah. I've listened to a few of them. You do a good job. So
no, thanks,
yeah, it's I forgot what I was talking. Oh, just if folks are more interested in like the physics, quantum physics, neuroscience stuff, that's what God's Eye View is about. that's more the stuff that kind of made me a believer, is just finding out that we're all believers.
And what about God's? What about Happy Fools?
Oh yeah, I got a podcast, Happy Fools. Yeah. Yep. We get into wild hijinks over there. I wasn't even going to plug it, but yeah, if you want to go check it out, go for it.
Perfect. And then Amazon, the best place to get the books?
Yeah, Amazon, God's Eye View, Shroud-Pilled.
There's a link in the show notes to that exact, for your Amazon link. So,
well, it's been great chatting again, and
guys.
hopefully we'll have another book out soon. We can do it again. And if you're serious about the audio, just email Graham.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, I'm writing about AI and the occult next, so stand by.
I was going to ask you about what you're writing next. Oh, that'll be really interesting.
We
got to do this. Oh, we got to do this again for sure.
It's a bizarre world, man. The working title is Sex, Drugs, and Silicon. Let me know what you guys think about it.
All right. I like it. Oh, that'll be fun. I can't wait to do that.
I'll send it over for a book blurb.
Sure.
Perfect.
Awesome. All right.
Well, this has been great. We appreciate you coming on the show again, and come back anytime.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was a chat about the Shroud-Pilled. It was good, right?
It was great.
I like the Shroud stuff. I mean,
I
remember.
Well, now I do. I didn't back in 2015 when it got popular again.
Yeah, well, when Sarah was going off, I was listening to a lot of Sarah. Then he had a pretty level-headed approach to everything, and he just got sort of encompassed by it. And then I was like, man, if he's this switched on, I feel like there's got to be something there, because I don't think he was even going into it as a Christian. He was going into it as trying to debunk it.
Yeah,
like it was a conspiracy. But here we are.
Yeah,
that
was the conspiracy show. I think that's what it was called, wasn't it?
That's right. Yeah. Not saying the name is messing me up, but big thanks for coming on the show, and come on the trips with us. Contact at thecabin.com. I'm telling you that solstice event is moving pretty quick. Almost out of private rooms, almost out of rooms on that. So it's going to be down to strictly camping soon. So if you don't want to camp, you want to check that out sooner and later at contact at thecabin.com. About 8 spots left for Easter Island. They'll be too late to come to Azores by the time this comes out, but I still see Timmy in the chats. Timmy, you could still come. You could try your first 4-week vacation away from home and see if you could pull it off or not. It'd be a good test. Then you come to the Azores with us. But check all that out. Adultbrain.ca for all those audiobooks. We just said number 200 come out on Audible and Spotify, so that's exciting. Check all that stuff out. And GramAmericaOutlawed.ca for the podcast. Other than that, love you guys. Thanks for listening. And we will see you next week.